classroom layout, and visual support can make the school year a success. Find out how with Stacy Linton from Autism Classroom. What is the number one thing I can do for my child? Ella Notbohm, author of 10 Things Your Student with Autism Wishes You Knew, is here to tell us. GFCF Pizza with Chef Tom Dickinson. It's for lunch and dinner. This and much more on this episode of Autism Today.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Autism Today TV. I'm here with my co-host, Thomas Todd, and we're going to be talking about back to school, some transitions between classrooms, transitions to a new school, and maybe even some transitions from home to school, how to make those a lot easier. As we all know, summertime is a great time for relaxing and having fun with your family. And then comes back to school, and that brings anxiety for a lot of our students. We're going to tell you some strategies, and we're going to bring in some special guests to tell you some strategies that you can use to help make this time of year pleasant and happy for all the kids. So I think we're going to start off with talking a little bit about some visual supports. We have made one up here. We'll go into a little more detail. You can make your own visual supports. You can put them into binders. You can even use the iPad. A lot of our students are using iPads these days, and they're very helpful to help with transitions and going back to school.
There are a number of different apps and or scheduled-like supports that you can use. Of course, this is a visual support that's non-technology based, which is always good to have everything backed up and used that way. And yes, visual scheduler and sounding boards and multiple other apps that you can use to program what's the next activity to do. Get up in the morning, get ready for school, go to the bus, go to school, participate in each of the activities at school, yes, as well as go home and help prepare for dinner and or participate in other evening activities at home, homework, clean up, and getting ready for bed and making your schedule and time for bed.
Correct. The visual schedule is an all-day long schedule, not just for school. It should help the child with activities from getting up in the morning to going to sleep at night. And fortunately, we have an expert on that and an expert on how to set up the classroom and how to set up a home study environment that is also going to help your child succeed and be successful with all their academic skills. And she is going to tell us about some of the best visual supports, and then we have examples to show you. So I'd like to welcome Stacy Linton, who is, she has written several books and designed several apps. Her app is called Room Layout, and it allows you to go in and lay out your classroom and without moving the heavy furniture. So you can just go in, do it on the app, make sure everything's okay, and then move the furniture. You only have to do it once. She also has an app called autismclassroom.com is her website, and her app is also called the Autism Classroom. And it gives you tips and strategies for working with everything from behavior to visual supports to academic tasks. So let's meet Stacy. Okay, so today we're going to talk to Stacy Linton, who has written 3 books: How to Set Up a Classroom for Students with Autism, How to Set Up a Work Area at Home for a Child with Autism, and Lesson Plans and Activities for Young Children with Autism and Related Special Needs. Wow, Stacy, that's a lot of work.
Definitely, but yes, it's worth it.
Yes. So this is the time of year when students start heading back to school, and we're all kind of nervous. The students are nervous. Of course, the parents are nervous. And one of the things we don't think about is the teachers. They get nervous also. So Stacy is going to give us some tips on setting up a classroom for a student with autism and special needs, and how to be successful with that student. Because when we first get our students with autism in particular, we really don't know how to manage them. And we don't, as Stacy says, we just need to take one step at a time. Stacy, what are some of the must-haves that a teacher can just start with in the classroom?
Well, definitely, one of the must-haves in a classroom would be some visual supports. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that you have things that are visual that the students can count on. So that we're not just using words to express information, we're using visuals. Additionally, you want to have some one-on-one areas in your classroom. You want to have some small group areas. a whole group area so that the kids do get an opportunity to work with other kids in the class as well. I also like for younger classrooms to have a structured play area so that you're teaching the play skills and you're teaching the social skills that we know a lot of our students need. And additionally, if you have enough space to create some type of a sensory area where kids can go to calm down if they need it or just to relax if they need it, those are some of the must-haves in the classroom.
Now, how about schedules? How important are schedules to our students and actually the students at large? I know that as we go into classrooms and we set it up for students with autism, generally the whole classroom benefits from the structure of that setup. But how important are the schedules for our kids?
I think the schedules are extremely important because the schedules can help to show the student the expectations of that school day or the expectations of that activity. And for some of our students, just knowing when the activity is going to end can help get them through that activity. But if they have nothing to go on and you go do activity after activity after activity, then they will decide when their break is going to be. With a schedule, you can show them, okay, we're going to do these things first, and then you get your break, and these things are next. But it also can promote independence because if a student can start to rely on the fact that the schedule shows them the things that are going to happen, they may be more likely to go to the next activity independently.
Can you tell us what other kinds of visual supports we should have within that classroom?
I think that the visual supports do show a representation of what the concept is or what the item is that's happening. And you can use photos or written lists. You could use logos as a visual support. Anything that helps that child to comprehend what you are trying to express or helps that child express what they may be trying to say to you. I think it's very helpful because when you have a visual support, in addition to your verbal language, the child can still see what you are saying even after your verbal language goes away. So sometimes when you have only verbal language, the message goes away. You say it goes away, and the student that may have some processing problems may be still trying to process what you said the first time. When you move on to the next sentence, they're still stuck at the last one. But if you have the visual support, then they can look down and still see exactly what it is you're trying to say.
Yes.
There's hundreds and hundreds of flashcards. Start with nouns. Put the picture of the dog and the word dog on the same side of the card. Not on opposite sides, same side of the card. And it's best to use photorealistic pictures. There's a lot of teaching materials out there that have a lot of kind of symbolic kind of pictures. Those don't work with a lot of kids. You can just get on the internet and find some, pictures of dogs or, or just take them yourself with your digital camera. Photorealistic things.
So those are very important to have in your classroom. So the structure, the schedules, the visual supports, all that help a student just make it through the day and understand what you're trying to tell him. Now, Stacy, if all that stuff doesn't work and there is a meltdown, what do we need to be prepared for that meltdown?
I think it helps if you have a place in your classroom where the student can go to that is free from a lot of clutter, free from a lot of noise. Maybe I've seen some classrooms actually have a tent in the classroom because the kid can go in the tent and then they can block out all the extra light, they can block out all the sound. If you don't have that in your classroom, some schools have a space that a child can go to. In those spaces I have seen, rugs or beanbag chairs, some things that are calming to the student because you just want them to be able to calm down and regulate if they're having a hard time or a hard day.
So having a break room is really, really important with some special items that the student likes or sensory items that help him calm down. Now let's talk about maybe the classroom setup establishing some independence with our students with autism? Is there anything we can do in the classroom that helps them become a little more independent?
I definitely think so. One of the things you can start with is just creating some physical boundaries in the classroom, and clear areas so that the students can see, what area is for what activity. And that is just a start. Additionally, you can label areas with pictures or photos so that when you say to the student, it's time to go to the art area, there should be a picture or a photo that shows them where the art area is. Creating schedules, as we mentioned again earlier, is important too, because the schedules help create a sense of independence. If the students can learn to depend on what the schedule says, the schedule becomes their routine, and they might learn to just follow what's on the schedule. So it doesn't matter if it changes, they follow what's on the schedule. Making things predictable can also promote independence in a lot of our students, and again, the routines.
Now, you've made an app that helps you set up the classroom, so you can build your classroom with this app, and you don't have to move around heavy furniture, and you can sit down with the rest of the team and decide where the break area is going to be, how many tables you have, and you can literally virtually create your classroom so that it best fits the student, and then go and do it. So that is classroom layout.
Yes, it's called Room Layout.
Room
and
layout.
That app does help you to establish a setup before you go and move that heavy furniture, because one thing I have learned over the years is you do have to try out different scenarios in the classroom before you get the one that you really like and the one that works for your students. And so this could eliminate a lot of moving of furniture ahead of time, or if you can't get into the school building, you could still use the app to get started in the process of determining where you want things to be in your room.
You've also created a app, Autism Classroom, and I know I have that one, and I use it a lot. And I also, if there's a teacher who's new, or a teacher just getting a student with autism don't know what to do, that's one of the first apps I said, just read through it. Take your time. You don't have to do everything today. Just decide what you can do today, what we should do tomorrow. You want to talk a little bit about Autism Classroom?
Oh, yes. The Autism Classroom app is an informational app for teachers that are new, like you said, new to autism or new to teaching, because we do have some people that may have been teaching for years but might be new to teaching students with autism.
Yes.
The app has some lesson plans on it, or just ideas for starting lessons. Additionally, it has information on behaviors. So some challenging behaviors that you might see, there's a list, and it will give you some strategies and questions to ask yourself. Sometimes people say, well, I have tried everything. But on this app, it will give you the list of behaviors, and it'll say, well, have you tried this, and this? And it gives you something to think about.
Stacy, why don't you tell us where we can get a hold of you, your books, your wonderful apps? I know you have a website.
Definitely. The website is called autismclassroom.com, and on the website, all the information for the books and the apps is there. Additionally, there are resources for parents and educators to help in the process of educating children with autism.
Well, thank you for stopping by today, and I hope we get to talk to you again in the future.
Thank you so much.
A visual support binder is another really, really good thing to do for your child. This is a big one. We have two sizes. It depends on your student's ability to see and the student's ability to pick off the pictures from the picture exchange. Two sizes here. Again, small. Can your student see this, and is he able to pick them off? And then we have the bigger one, which I'm going to demonstrate here. First page is just pictures of the school. Here's the school, here's the bathroom, the hallway, the crossing guard. Here's the office. This is the principal, and this is the backpack. This really orients him back to school and doesn't leave anything for chance. Next page is a picture of friends. Here's your friends in classroom with the teacher. Here's them separately. It's labeled my friends, the whole classroom. Here's your teachers. And this really helps, again, to the child can say, oh my gosh, I'm going back to school on the 3rd. These are my friends. This is my school. It's going to be okay. Might be a good idea even to get a picture of the school bus and the school bus driver. That's very important also. We have behind us, once the student is in class, we have a schedule for them that comes from the beginning to the time he gets home. Hopefully there's schedules also at home that go from when the child wakes up to when the child goes to sleep. But basically, Thomas, I don't know, maybe you can reach these a little bit better than me.
I can. So basically you can take it off and you can say, this is the time to use the bathroom. And one of the really great adaptations that you've done here to show today is making sure that you have rounded the edges.
Round the edges.
This way you're able to cut down on possible, ouch, ooh, I took it off and I've cut myself. Or again, it's an interactive schedule, so if you're having the student, okay, you finish this activity, put it in here, it's easier than you finish this activity and you know that there are little scratches, little paper cuts.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And also some of our kids may want to put them in their mouths, and those sharp corners have caught a lot of lips. So just be sure to round the corners off. It just makes it a little safer for me and you too, because I pricked my fingers on those corners plenty. So those are our visual supports. There's also plenty of visual supports on the iPad. The iPad is great, and many students are heading back to school with iPads. So a little pre-planning on the part of either the parents or the teacher, and you could program all that stuff into the iPad along with schedules, and your student can just follow along the day's activity.
And it's a great activity that you can actually do before school starts as a teacher to pre-call that parent again and establish the schedule at school and find out what is some of the morning routine that happens for that student, what is some of the evening routine, so that the parent can either be the participant in scheduling the iPad type apps or digital electronic type calendar or scheduling applications used to include the home, to include the school activities, and to include the evening activities as well.
Yep. And now that we have all the visual supports and the front loading to get everyone to school, make them feel comfortable, we have to worry about now the teachers. What do the teachers need to know? Some teachers have never had a student with autism in their classroom. It's a little bit challenging. What do you do? How do you do it? What does this student know? How is he different from all my other students? And luckily, we have an expert with us, Thomas, who's going to talk about it. She wrote the book, 10 Things Every Student with Autism Wishes You Knew. She's award-winning. She's fabulous. And truth be known, there's more than 10 things in that book. There's 100 things that you should know if you are going to have a student with autism in your classroom. So here she is, Ellen Notbohm. I'm very honored to welcome our next guest, which is Ellen Notbohm. She is an award-winning author. Today we're going to be discussing the 10 things that your student with autism wishes you knew. Ellen has also written the very, very popular book, 10 Things That Every Child with Autism Wishes You Knew. But today, since we're talking about schools and in-school themes, we're going to stick with the things your student wishes you knew. So, welcome, Ellen.
Thank you.
I'm honored to have you here today. This is
a
treat for
here.
me.
It's a good match.
This is a real treat. So I think we're going to start off with probably the number one question, and I know it's a very difficult one for you to answer. It's a difficult one for any of us to answer, but there is one question that we hear so much is, what is the number one thing that I can do as a parent or an educator for my child?
And I do get that question a lot, and I used to get it so much that I would answer simply, question would come in the form of what's the most important thing I need to do for my child, and I would say, keep breathing. And that answer didn't go over very well, so I was forced to come up with a better answer. And after putting 2 children with special needs through school and the many hundreds of teachers that I interacted with during that time, it became pretty clear to me that the most important thing we do for our children is to create productive, dynamic relationships with our schools.
I totally agree. As a person who's been on both sides myself, sitting at both sides of the IEP table, I cannot agree with enough. It has to be a team effort. It really
yeah,
does.
and sitting on the side of the IEP table as a parent is challenging in many ways. For one thing, aren't you always like squeezed into those little second grade chairs, and the parents on one side of the table,
Yes.
and the teachers are, and the other specialists and therapists are on the other side. And I came to view it as kind of the old 7-on-1 was what I called it. And it calls for the parent to really assemble a great deal of knowledge in a lot of areas that they've never been exposed to previously in a short amount of time, and they have to assemble that knowledge because they have to know the right questions to ask. Right. So that team dynamic becomes extremely important. And what I emphasize in the book is that often we fail to keep the child at the center of that team dynamic. And that the first thing we have to do is remind ourselves very simply of what is the definition of a team. A team is a group of people who are assembled for a single person, and they all contribute in their own responsible ways to the success of the team and to the reaching of that goal. So what that means is you have to come into that team dynamic in a productive way. And what I see too often in schools is a team dynamic that is either unproductive or what I call poisonous team dynamics, or you may have an indifferent team dynamic, or you can have a productive team dynamic. And there are numerous different ways that those dynamics can play out. Well, a productive team dynamic does start with communication. And there are many ways to communicate now that weren't in place years ago when I was trying to keep a daily communication with my school. But that productive team dynamic starts with each member accepting responsibility for their role on the team and freely sharing information with the other members of the team, with the goal being the child. So that's the productive team dynamic. And the opposite of that, the poisonous team dynamic, is when we as adults fail to keep that child in the crosshairs and we come into our relationships with the school with a mentality, something other than team, which is, you see it play out in what I call the combat mentality. And that tends to happen when parents assume that the teaching experience will be negative if their previous experiences have been. The teacher assumes the child will present similar problems to other children with autism, when in fact we need to come into these relationships with a clean slate. Whatever experiences we as parents have had with teachers previously deserve to stay in the past and give this teacher a clean slate and a chance to prove what he or she can do. And the teacher needs to come into it without the assumption that this parent or this child will embody characteristics that they've experienced before.
And then let's go beyond the IEP table, and we want to keep this communication, this relationship growing. I know for myself personally, I'm a big techie person, so I love the new technology. We're able to communicate via, say, emails and screenshots and all these wonderful things about what the child's doing. However, not everyone has access to that. You have a couple tips, Ellen, on how to keep communication alive, well, and happy, and how often should that happen?
Daily. I mean, So I was sending my child with autism through elementary school at a time when email was available, but not as readily available as it is now. We didn't have the mobile technologies or the pads or anything required going to a desktop and tapping out the message, which wasn't always realistic for a teacher. And sometimes the low-tech ways are best. We had a paper notebook that went back and forth every day, and the teacher or the paraeducator would scrawl a couple of lines in the book about what had happened that day and what we needed to know or be alert for, and we would send a few lines back each day. Now, what this did was create for the child a total picture of his life for all the people who were intimately involved in his life, because a lot happens between 3 p.m. and 8 a.m. and especially on weekends. And the teacher is not apprised of what's going on with that child's life when he's at home, and neither is the parent aware of all that happens between 8 p.m. and 3 p.m. And in order for parent and school to create a holistic, supportive environment for the child, they have to know freely what each other are doing, and the only way to do that is to communicate. And that exchange of ideas flows, and we get to know whether the child struggled with a particular transition, or that he ate something that didn't agree with him, or I can think of 100 things off the top of my head that affect learning, and so can you.
Yes.
And the fuller picture we have of our child's 24-hour day, the better we're able to serve them as a whole child.
Good teamwork and good communication is key. I agree.
Yes.
That probably is number one.
Yes.
And in your book, you outline 9 more. However, in your book also, I've read it, there's more than 9. There's more than 10. There's actually hundreds of great tips in here. I really enjoyed reading it. I do have a viewer question. It comes from teachers who are new to children on the spectrum. And of course, their number one fear is, oh my gosh, what am I going to do if I see a negative behavior or behavior that disrupts the other class? They just really don't know how to manage that. So maybe a little advice?
Mm-hmm. Well, and of course, all children have behaviors. And the number one thing to remember, well, there's actually many number one things to remember, but really the number one thing to remember is that all behavior is a form of communication. And it may be the only form of communication a child with autism has. Many of them have impaired communication abilities, and if their language skills don't match your expectations, they are going to find some other way to communicate their needs and their wants. And frequently, a child with autism will be overwhelmed sensorially. There will be sensory aspects of the classroom that are simply beyond his ability to endure. Or there will be psychological aspects of the classroom that will be beyond his ability to endure, and that usually attends to he is somehow not meeting an expectation that he doesn't have the tools to meet. And so you'll see the meltdown, the negative behavior, whatever you want to call it. We are not going to call it a tantrum because it's not a conscious choice. And dealing with behaviors always begins with recognizing that it's communication, and recognizing that until we identify the source of the behavior and eradicate the source, we're never going to be able to squelch that behavior entirely. You may be able to squelch a specific behavior, but if you have not met the need, another behavior will pop up to replace it. So there are steps that teachers can take, and parents, to identify behaviors, and the simplest way to start is to simply